The collision of worlds. Gabriel Winters stepped out of his sleek silver sedan, adjusting his charcoal suit jacket against the crisp autumn air of Portland. At 35, he had become one of the city's most respected architects, known for designing spaces that blended seamlessly with nature, a stark contrast to the rigid walls he'd built around his heart. The maple trees lining the street were shedding their amber leaves, creating a golden pathway that crunched beneath his leather shoes. 7 years had passed since the accident that claimed his brother's life. 7 years of burying himself in work, of living in the minimalist penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. "Just the usual, please," he told the barista at Wildflower Cafe, his morning ritual unchanged for years. Black coffee, no sugar, bitter like the memories he couldn't seem to escape. Outside the cafe window, Portland continued its Monday morning dance. People hurried by, faces illuminated by phone screens, lives rushing forward while Gabriel remained frozen in time. He checked his watch, a client meeting in 30 minutes. Across the street, Sophia Chen adjusted her bright teal scarf as she hurried toward the community center where she taught dance therapy. At 29, her life was a beautiful chaos of helping others find healing through movement. Today's session with the Trauma Survivors Group had her particularly excited. They were making breakthrough progress. Rain began to sprinkle down, and Sophia fumbled with her phone, trying to check the time while balancing her coffee and canvas bag filled with materials for her class. The crosswalk signal flashed white, and she stepped into the street, eyes still on her screen. Gabriel was halfway to his car when he heard the screech of tires. Looking up, he saw it all unfold with horrifying clarity. A delivery truck skidding on wet pavement, the driver frantically honking, and a woman in a teal scarf, unaware of the danger hurtling toward her. His body moved before his mind could process the decision. Dropping his coffee, Gabriel sprinted across the sidewalk, his heart pounding with a familiar terror. "Hey, look out!" he shouted, closing the distance in 3 long strides. Sophia looked up just as Gabriel reached her, his arm circling her waist as he pulled her backward. They tumbled onto the sidewalk as the truck barreled past, missing them by inches. Her coffee splashed across the concrete, mixing with the rain in swirling patterns. For a moment they remained frozen, Gabriel's arm still protectively around her, Sophia's breath coming in short gasps. The world around them blurred as pedestrians gathered and the truck driver pulled over, shouting apologies. "Are you hurt?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse as he helped her sit up. Sophia shook her head, brown eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "You saved my life," she whispered, her hand trembling as she touched his arm. "I don't even know your name." "Gabriel," he offered simply, suddenly aware of how close they were, of how long it had been since he'd touched another person with such urgency, such purpose. "I'm Sophia," she replied, a tentative smile breaking through her shock. "I guess the universe decided we needed to meet." Something in her words, in the warmth of her gaze, made Gabriel's carefully constructed walls shudder. As he helped her gather her scattered belongings, their fingers brushed, and for the first time in 7 years, Gabriel felt something spark to life inside him, a dangerous, forgotten feeling, hope, ripples of connection. 3 weeks after the near accident, Gabriel found himself standing awkwardly in the doorway of room 17 at the Riverdale Community Center, watching as Sophia guided a small group through fluid movements. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, stray tendrils framing her face as she demonstrated a gentle spin that somehow conveyed both strength and vulnerability. He hadn't planned to see her again. Their brief encounter had ended with polite thanks and an exchange of phone numbers just in case, a courtesy that Gabriel had convinced himself would lead nowhere. Yet something had drawn him to search for her online, discovering her dance therapy program through the community center's website. "Remember to breathe into the movement," Sophia was saying, her voice gentle yet assured. "Let your body tell its own story." Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. He didn't belong here among these people seeking healing. He built structures of steel and glass, not bridges to emotional wellness. He was about to retreat when Sophia glanced up and saw him. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by a genuine smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. She nodded slightly, acknowledging his presence without interrupting her class. When the session ended, participants filed past Gabriel with curious glances. Sophia approached, her cheeks flushed from movement. "My mysterious rescuer appears again," she said, humor warming her voice. "Are you here to save me from another runaway vehicle, or did you develop a sudden interest in dance therapy?" Gabriel found himself smiling, a rusty, unfamiliar sensation. "I was in the neighborhood for a project consultation," he lied, then immediately wondered why. "Thought I'd see how you were doing." "Better than I would be if you hadn't been there," she replied. "Actually, I was going to call you. I owe you a proper thank you, at minimum a coffee to replace the one you sacrificed in the name of heroism." The invitation hung between them, light yet somehow weighty with possibility. "I have time now if you do," Gabriel heard himself say, surprising himself. 30 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth at Moonstone Cafe, steam rising from their mugs as raindrops raced down the window beside them. Gabriel learned that Sophia had studied psychology before discovering dance therapy, that she lived in a tiny apartment with too many plants, and that her laugh was unexpectedly melodic. "What about you?" she asked, cupping her mug between her hands. "What drives Gabriel Winters besides rescuing distracted pedestrians?" He gave her the sanitized version of his life. Successful architectural firm, specialized in sustainable design, lived alone. Safe facts that revealed nothing of substance. "And what do you design when you're not working?" Sophia asked, leaning forward slightly. Gabriel frowned. "What do you mean?" "The spaces you create for yourself. For joy, for connection." Her gaze was curious, not judgmental, yet Gabriel felt strangely exposed. "I don't have much time for that," he admitted. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most beautiful spaces are the ones we haven't built yet," she said. "They're just waiting for us to find the courage to begin." As they parted ways that evening, Gabriel felt something shift inside him, a small but persistent ripple in the still waters of his existence, as if Sophia had tossed a pebble into the depths of his carefully ordered life. Walls of glass Gabriel stood in his penthouse, surveying the space he'd designed with such precision. Minimalist furniture in muted tones, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Portland, a perfect showcase of his aesthetic sensibilities. Yet tonight, Sophia's question echoed in his mind. What spaces had he designed for joy? Over the past month, coffee with Sophia had somehow become a weekly occurrence. Their conversations had evolved from polite small talk to deeper exchanges, revealing gradual glimpses of their inner worlds. Gabriel found himself looking forward to these meetings with an intensity that both confused and alarmed him. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Community center fundraiser tonight. Live music, decent wine, worthy cause. Come rescue me from boring conversations." Gabriel hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Social events weren't his forte, especially those involving strangers and small talk. Yet the thought of seeing Sophia's smile in person rather than remembering it during solitary evenings. "What time?" he typed back. The community center had been transformed with string lights and local artwork. Gabriel tugged at his collar, feeling overdressed in his tailored shirt among the casual crowd. Then he saw Sophia across the room, wearing a simple burgundy dress that caught the light as she moved. She was laughing with an elderly couple, her hands animated as she spoke. When she spotted him, her entire face brightened. "You came," she said as she approached, touching his arm lightly. "I said I would," Gabriel replied, suddenly aware of how close she stood, the subtle scent of her perfume, something with notes of vanilla and spice. As the evening progressed, Gabriel found himself surprisingly at ease, watching Sophia in her element, connecting people, building invisible bridges between strangers. When a local jazz quartet began playing, she pulled him toward a small dance floor. "I don't dance," he protested quietly. "Everyone dances," she countered. "Some just haven't found their rhythm yet." Under the gentle guidance of her hands, Gabriel found himself swaying to the music, their bodies gradually moving closer together. Something tender and dangerous unfurled in his chest. Later, as they walked along the riverfront, streetlights reflecting on the water's surface, Gabriel found himself telling Sophia about James, his younger brother, his death in the car accident, the guilt that had haunted Gabriel for 7 years. "I was driving," he admitted, the words scraping his throat. "A moment's distraction, that's all it took." He was 24. Sophia's fingers intertwined with his, warm and steady. "And you've been punishing yourself ever since," she observed softly. "I don't know how to stop," he whispered. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "The day we met, when you pulled me from that truck's path, what did you feel?" Gabriel considered this. "Adrenaline, fear, and afterward, relief." "Not guilt for putting yourself at risk?" "No, it was—" He searched for the words. "It felt right, necessary." Sophia's eyes held his, unwavering. "Perhaps that's where healing begins. Not in denial or forgetting, but in allowing yourself to feel something beyond the pain." As moonlight silvered her features, Gabriel realized how desperately he wanted to kiss her. Instead, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingertips lingering against her cheek. "I'm afraid," he admitted, "of what might happen if I let myself feel everything that's been locked away." "I know," Sophia whispered, leaning slightly into his touch. "But some walls aren't meant to protect us, Gabriel. They're just keeping us from living. The storm and shelter." The call came at 2:17 a.m., Sophia's voice tight with worry. "Gabriel, I'm sorry to wake you, but there's a fire in my building. Everyone's evacuated, but I don't know where to go." 20 minutes later, Gabriel pulled up to find her sitting on a curb across from her apartment building, watching as firefighters battled the blaze. Her hair was damp from rain, a hastily grabbed backpack clutched to her chest. When she saw his car, she stood shakily, relief washing over her face. "I didn't know who else to call," she said as he wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "I'm glad you called me," Gabriel replied, surprising himself with how deeply he meant it. In his penthouse, Gabriel watched Sophia move through his sterile space like a splash of watercolor on blank canvas. He gave her dry clothes, a t-shirt and sweatpants that dwarfed her frame, and prepared the guest room, though it had never actually hosted a guest before. "Your home is exactly as I imagined," she said, curling into the corner of his sofa with a mug of tea. "Beautiful, precise, and a little bit lonely." Gabriel couldn't argue with her assessment. "It serves its purpose." "Which is what?" Sophia asked gently. "To remind you not to get too comfortable, not to need anything or anyone." Something in her words struck a nerve. "Not everyone needs their space to feel like a therapy session," he said, more sharply than intended. Sophia fell silent, hurt flashing across her features. Gabriel immediately regretted his tone. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting beside her. "You're right. This place is a reflection of what I thought I deserved after James died. Functional but empty of joy." "You think you don't deserve joy?" Sophia asked, her voice soft. Gabriel stared at his hands. "I was responsible for him. He trusted me. And what would James want for you now? 7 years of self-punishment or permission to live again?" The question unleashed something inside Gabriel, a dam breaking after years of carefully contained grief. His shoulders began to shake as 7 years of suppressed emotion surged to the surface. Sophia moved closer, her arms encircling him as he finally allowed himself to weep for his brother, for the years lost to guilt, for the life he'd denied himself. She held him without judgment, her fingers gently combing through his hair, her presence a shelter in the storm of his grief. Later, as rain pattered against the windows and the city lights glimmered beyond the glass, they remained entangled on the sofa. Sophia's head rested against Gabriel's chest, her breathing slow and steady. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. She lifted her face to his. "For what?" "For seeing me, even when I didn't want to be seen." In the dim light, her eyes searched his. Gabriel slowly traced the curve of her cheek, the softness of her lips with his fingertips. When their mouths finally met, it was like coming home to a place he'd never been. Tentative at first, then deepening with shared hunger and tenderness. Their bodies moved together with a quiet urgency, discovering and reverent. Gabriel marveled at the softness of her skin beneath his palms, the way she arched toward him, the sound of his name on her lips. What began as comfort transformed into passion, then something deeper still, a connection that transcended the physical healing places within him he'd thought permanently broken. Afterward, breathing heavily in the sanctuary they'd created between them, Gabriel felt a profound shift in his understanding of himself, of what was possible. Sophia's fingers traced patterns across his chest, her touch both soothing and electrifying. "Stay," he whispered against her hair. "Not just tonight." Sophia smiled against his skin. "I was hoping you'd say that." Dawn after darkness. 6 months later, Gabriel stood in the center of what had once been his austere living room, barely recognizing the space or himself. The penthouse had transformed gradually, Sophia's books on the shelves, colorful throw pillows on the furniture, photographs in frames, and art on walls that had previously remained bare. Most striking was the room they'd converted into a small dance studio, with hardwood floors, mirrors, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Here, Sophia worked with private clients and developed new therapy approaches, while Gabriel had discovered, to his surprise, that movement could be healing for him too. Outside, Portland basked in spring sunshine, cherry blossoms dusting the streets with pink. Gabriel checked his watch, anticipation warming his chest. Today marked the grand opening of Chrysalis, the community arts and healing center he and Sophia had collaborated on designing over the past months. The idea had been born during a late-night conversation, as Sophia described her dream of creating a space where therapy, art, and community could intersect. Gabriel had sketched the first designs that very night, his architectural vision merging seamlessly with her therapeutic philosophy. "Ready?" Sophia appeared in the doorway, radiant in a blue dress that matched the color of the butterfly logo they'd chosen for Chrysalis. She carried a small potted tree, a tradition she'd started, bringing living things into their home to mark significant moments. "Almost," Gabriel replied, crossing to her. He reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the small velvet box he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. The center was already bustling when they arrived. Former clients of Sophia's, colleagues of Gabriel's, community members, and city officials gathered in the central atrium, a circular space designed to evoke both protection and possibility, with skylights creating patterns of light across the bamboo floor. As speeches began and the ceremonial ribbon waited to be cut, Gabriel found himself watching Sophia rather than the proceedings. Her face was alight with joy and purpose. Everything she was and everything she had helped him become crystallized in this moment. When his turn came to speak, Gabriel stepped forward, his notes forgotten. "7 months ago, I was a man living half a life," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion swelling in his chest. "I designed spaces for others to live and work in, without understanding what makes a space truly alive. Then a chance encounter," he smiled at Sophia, "showed me that the most important architecture isn't built of steel and concrete, but of courage and connection." He gestured to the building around them. "Chrysalis represents transformation, the journey from isolation to community, from pain to possibility. This center exists because Sophia Chen taught me that our deepest wounds can become doorways if we're brave enough to walk through them." As applause filled the atrium, Gabriel sought Sophia in the crowd. Their eyes met across the space, a silent conversation passing between them. Later, as sunset painted the sky in amber and rose, they stood on the rooftop garden of Chrysalis, another of Gabriel's designs, with meandering paths and secluded benches among flowering plants. The city stretched below them, lights beginning to twinkle on as dusk descended. "You know," Sophia said, leaning against the railing beside him, "when you pulled me from that truck's path, I never imagined we'd end up here." Gabriel took her hand, running his thumb across her knuckles. "I was trying to save you," he said softly. "I never realized you'd save me instead." As the first stars appeared overhead, Gabriel knelt before her, opening the small velvet box to reveal a ring. Not a traditional diamond, but an opal surrounded by tiny sapphires, as unique as their journey together. "Sophia Chen," he said, his voice unwavering despite his racing heart. You taught me that life doesn't move in straight lines but in beautiful, unpredictable spirals. Will you continue this dance with me as my wife? Tears shimmered in Sophia's eyes as she pulled him to his feet. Yes, she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times, yes. As they embraced, Gabriel marveled at how differently he now moved through the world, no longer haunted by the past, but anchored in the present, with hope for the future. Their love story hadn't erased his grief or her challenges, but had created space for healing, for growth, for the messy, magnificent experience of being fully alive. In that moment, bathed in twilight on the rooftop of a dream they'd built together, Gabriel understood completely. Sometimes saving a stranger from danger becomes saving yourself from isolation. Sometimes a random collision becomes the beginning of the most meaningful journey. Sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the perfect beginning.